Good morning. No, good morning, Mr. Gale.
Good morning, my lord.
Now.
Yes, my lord. There are three witnesses today, and these are the final three witnesses from the care home relatives group.
Yep.
The first witness is Mrs. Verona Gibson.
Thank you.
And for the record, my lord, her witness statement has the reference SCI WT 0452 and then 5 zeros 1.
Very good. Now, good morning, Mrs. Gibson. Please take a seat and make yourself as comfortable as you can. Yes. Mr. Gale, when you're ready.
Thank you, my lord. Hello, Mrs. Gibson.
Hello.
Now, your full name, please?
Verona Ann Gibson.
Yes. And your details and contact information are known to the inquiry. You provided the inquiry with a statement, and I will take you through various parts of that statement just to obtain a little bit more information from you. But you can confirm that the statement is in its entirety, is your evidence to the inquiry, and you would agree that it can be published in due course. Yep. Now, you are here, Mrs. Gibson, to provide us with your account of the impact that the pandemic and the associated restrictions had on your daughter. As you are aware, there is a general restriction order. So while it may be very natural to call your daughter by her name, could you please avoid doing that? And similarly, any other family members, please do not name them. And similarly, will you also avoid naming the location where your daughter is and was in care? I think we can, however, take that we can calculate from the information you've given us that your daughter is 39 years old.
That's right.
And your daughter has been a resident in a care home, and the inquiry obviously knows the location of that care home. She's been there, I think, since December 2009, is that right? And at that time, you, your daughter's father, and a multidisciplinary team decided that she should be in full-time care.
That's correct.
Yes.
She was actually in full-time care before that in a different setting. But
in a different setting,
correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And I think the home where your daughter went and has been since provides support for adults with learning disabilities and complex needs.
That's correct.
And I don't intend to ask you any particular details about your daughter's condition, but perhaps just for the purposes of understanding the impact of the pandemic on her, just one or two matters perhaps we could just clarify. She is unable to walk, I think, is that right?
Correct.
And is confined to a wheelchair.
Yes.
She also suffers from anxiety.
Significant anxiety.
Yes.
Yes, and she has mental health challenges as well.
And mental health challenges, yes. She requires to be in a specialist unit given those challenges.
That's correct.
Yeah. And I think you and your daughter's husband, your daughter's father, have a power of attorney in respect of her.
That's correct, and her, excuse me, and her elder sister.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, prior to the pandemic, what were the circumstances of you visiting your daughter in her care home?
There were absolutely no restrictions at all in visiting the care home. I was free to come and go at any time. So
And
it was just restriction-free.
yes. And I think you say at paragraph 12 of your statement that your daughter's home is an extension of my own home.
Yes.
Can you just explain how you saw that operating?
Well, my daughter's been obviously in her care home. Well, it's 14 years now. Yeah. So I'm just so well known in the home. I've been involved in her life extensively, all of her life, and I'm just free to come and go, be in her room, be with her. I know all the staff. I know the handyman, the laundry lady, the ladies that prepare the meals. I was free to go around the home. So yeah, I'm very well known in the home.
Yes. And I think you praise the home.
Oh yes.
And we can see that in paragraphs 13 and 14. You say that the staff at my daughter's care home really care about her.
They do.
And she's got a very good relationship with them.
She does. I mean, I can't praise the staff more highly, particularly during the period of the pandemic, because the impact on my daughter and myself was bad, but it was also bad on the staff.
Yes.
You know, they were having to cope with a lot of the fallout of these restrictions with the residents.
And pre-pandemic, your daughter was able to go out to, as you say in paragraph 15, a day service. What did that involve?
It's a service which is provided by the local council, so it's a day service where people, with different needs will all go to socialise and carry out activities. So she's been going there for a very long time, although it did take a number of years for her to settle down and be able to stay without being unwell. Yes. But we've got there now, which is...
Yeah. And you say that the staff there are excellent, and that they know your daughter very well.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been caring for her for a very, very long time.
And she was also able to go out on social outings with local clubs, where she was able to socialise with other younger adults who have varying disabilities.
Yes, and they would go and, they would go on outings, they would go for coffee, they'd go to the cinema, they would do all sorts of things as a group. And that was good for my daughter because she was, she was meeting younger adults and going out and socialising normally as we would all do.
Yeah. And I think one can infer from what you say in paragraph 17 of your statement that your daughter was able to socialise in local cafes, shops, the local bank, and the local community were aware of her and knew her. And
she's quite a personality when she's well.
Yes.
And we've got to know a lot of people from going out. There's one particular shop that we go into where all of the girls know her very well, and as soon as she's in the shop, they're all round her and chatting to her. And same in the bank, they all know her in the bank. In fact, I'm always surprised when I'm out with my daughter how many people actually know her. So yeah, she's and the nice thing about that is that it makes her feel valued. People are really kind to her and make her feel valued, and she's welcomed when she goes into these premises.
Yeah. And the arrangements for her visiting your own home before the pandemic, what were they?
She was free to do that at any time. I would go and collect her and bring her home. And there were never any restrictions on that at all.
Yeah. Now, you say in paragraph 19 that there was interest in considering a move into a more community-based setting. Could you just explain when that interest was taking place and what it involved?
Well, it was definitely a subject that my daughter brought up before the pandemic, and it was a discussion that we were having with our social worker about whether that might be a possibility. Now, my daughter obviously has her particular difficulties, and so whether we would have been able to realise that for her, I cannot say. But what I would say about that was that it was something that she was quite excited about at the time, and that conversation has completely disappeared now. Yes. She does not talk about it at all. I've confirmed that with her staff, because obviously sometimes she might be speaking to her staff about something different to me, but she's not mentioned it for months and months. And another relative also who knows my daughter mentioned to me that she had not heard her talking about this, and this used to be a big topic of conversation for her.
I think you mentioned later in your statement that the future is not something your daughter talks about.
No, she doesn't refer to it now at all.
And you tell us about the various things that you were able to take your daughter to, for example, dental checkups. You took her to a hospital appointment. Presumably, I think one of the other things we always hear about is going to the hairdresser. You would be able to, or she would be able to do that, or you would be able to help her with that.
I took her to all of those things. In fact, I was in a meeting recently at her care home, and somebody asked a member of staff, "What does Mum do for your daughter?" And she said, "Everything."
Your daughter was and is quite adept at using an iPad.
She loves technology.
Yeah.
Her favourite things are her Switch, her PS4, her iPad, and she's able to use her iPad to make video calls. She sends me voice messages. She sends me little emails. She can email her manager in the care home. She emails people like her speech and language therapists. Very simple emails, but she can navigate those and do those things. So she's able to communicate that way.
Well, most of that is probably a mystery to me, but it's obviously something that was a way in which you could keep in touch with her.
Yes, we'd been communicating like that before the pandemic. My daughter communicates with me every day, so we were used to that form of communication, and she was comfortable with that. She could manage that perfectly well.
And would she communicate with you if she perceived that she was having a problem, or if there was anything worrying her?
Oh yes. Yes, absolutely. Yes. She looks to me to fix everything. Yes. So if there's a problem, she'll tell me about it, and she'll want me to sort it for her.
Okay. And in paragraph 26 of your statement, you say, and this is something we've heard from many people, that you considered yourself to be a part or a member of the care team and involved in all meetings that take place with a multidisciplinary team, including all regular reviews.
I don't think there will ever have been a meeting that I have missed in connection with my daughter in all of her life.
Right. We'll go now to the initial events of the pandemic, and you tell us about how you became aware of the lockdown of the home. And you say in 27 that you didn't get the opportunity to explain to her in person what was happening. Was that important?
I think it was important because when the lockdown came, nobody foresaw what was going to happen in terms of the length of time of that lockdown. I think in the beginning there was, rumour around that it would be about 3 weeks. But I feel I should have been able to sit down and speak with her and just explain to her quietly what was going to happen, because if you put yourself in my daughter's shoes, that's quite a frightening position to suddenly find yourself in. Mm-hmm. And when you've got a learning difficulty as well, trying to rationalise that is quite a challenge. Yeah. So I would have very much appreciated the opportunity to sit with her and explain to her what was happening at the time. Did
you ask for that opportunity?
Well, no, I didn't get the chance because I was told the home was locked down. It's just...
You presumably would have had an opportunity, given your daughter's abilities with technology, to tell her about it online. Was that successful, or do you feel that your daughter didn't really appreciate what was being said?
Well, in the beginning, what she understood was there was a virus. Now, what a virus would mean to my daughter, I don't really know. Yeah. But there was a virus, and that we were all having to stay at home. And I think that she was, I was really proud of her for accepting that at the time. But as time went on, and as the lockdown increased, and as we became aware, or I became aware, that she wasn't going to be getting out anytime soon, I could see that this was having a really difficult and detrimental impact on her, because she couldn't understand why she wasn't allowed to get out.
And obviously you couldn't get in to visit her.
No, I couldn't get in to visit her. I didn't get in to visit my daughter. I think I got in to visit her maybe in August, some point in August.
Right. You tell us about garden visits in paragraph 33, and again we've heard from many witnesses so far about the problems that are associated with garden visits, not least the weather, the circumstances in which you are having to communicate with people. So we are aware of what you're saying, and what you're saying is something we have heard from a number of people. The one thing that you do emphasize in paragraph 33 is the extent of the distress that this caused to your daughter. And I appreciate it, and I don't want to go into the detail of that, Mrs. Gibson, but was that an element of distress that was something that was unusual for your daughter?
I would say so. I mean, my daughter, obviously her challenges in life mean that she can get very distressed. But what we were in there was a very unnatural situation. I mean, the most natural thing for a child when they're upset, and I know she's an adult, but is to be consoled by her mother.
Yes.
And for me as a mother, the most natural thing for me to do was to console my child. Yes. And she found it very, very difficult to cope with that.
Yeah. And you also make the point that, and I think it's a specific point, that she hated you wearing a mask because she wasn't able to see your face.
She hated masks. Yeah. She found masks.
Was she wearing a mask?
No, because of her anxiety, she wasn't able to wear a mask.
Okay. And you say in paragraph 34 that you saw changes in her.
Yes.
Can you just explain how these changes manifested themselves? I presume these are through seeing her on her iPad or on your iPad, presumably. Can you just explain what these changes were?
It was kind of changes more, I would say. I mean, it's hard to remember absolutely everything.
I appreciate that.
This is such a long time ago now, but, changes in her mood. She would be a bit less maybe communicative. She was often quite upset on these calls. She was looking for me to sort out, the problems that she was experiencing in terms of not being able to see me and not being able to get out of the care home. So, she just got really emotional. And,
But you were aware that the staff within the care home were giving her very good support.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how she and I would have survived what we went through if it hadn't been for the staff. She had a fantastic staff team in that unit.
And you say that your daughter was video calling you 5 or 6 times a day. Was that an increase on what had been the position pre-pandemic?
A huge increase. Yeah. I mean, I would always speak to her every day, but this was on another level of phone calling, and I obviously was compelled to speak to her. I was trying to keep her spirits up and keep her going. I'm struggling to put into words how upsetting those calls could be and how difficult they were for both my daughter and myself.
You did mention the question of essential visits. Was that something that was mentioned to you, or did you have to find out about that?
I had to find out about them. I can't remember how I found out about them, but no one ever spoke to me about essential visits. And I did phone up and speak to the clinical lead who was in the home at the time, and I remember his very words were, "End of life only, Verona. End of life only."
You say that, paragraph 36, that you didn't take that any further and that you wish you had, and you feel a bit guilty about that.
Absolutely, I do. I should have definitely pushed on that issue. But the problem was, I think everybody was becoming very entrenched in their beliefs about what that meant. Yes. And as far as my daughter's care home was concerned at the time, that was the way that they were interpreting essential visits.
You say at paragraph 37, and it conveys the length of time that you hadn't seen your daughter in person. It had only been for 2 hours.
That's right.
Since March through to August.
That's right.
And then when you moved on to indoor visits, and again, some of these are rather unnatural. I think we've heard from many witnesses. You were able to access your daughter's lounge through a patio door to the garden, so you weren't going in through any any possibility of coming into contact with anyone else.
No, I would obviously, in the normal course of events, I would enter my daughter's care home, through the main door into the unit. But I was escorted. I had to be escorted round the back and let into her room via her patio door. And then I had to sit on a sanitised plastic chair, which they wiped before I sat down, near an open window. And my daughter was on the other side of the room. And this was almost felt dystopian, to be quite honest with you. I'd been in that room for 11 years, freely moving around. Yes. And it became it was just completely unnatural. And I have to say, I do feel for the staff as well, because I think the staff were maybe not comfortable with some of the things I was being asked to do either, because they knew me very well. They knew I was just, to be honest, I'm in with the bricks in my daughter's care home. I've been going in there that long. So it was a very awkward situation for all of us, to be honest.
You say at paragraph 41 that at the end of July, 2020, you sent an email to the care home manager raising your concerns about your daughter's mental and physical health and asking for her to be allowed to get out to visit your own home. Now, again, you may have already given us an indication of this. You have mentioned, obviously, your daughter's mental health and the extent to which she was distressed when you had contact with her in the way that you were able to do. What were the changes in her physical health?
Of course, it's difficult to see somebody properly through an iPad, but she was very tired, very black-eyed. Her pallor wasn't great. She was also, I could see that she was putting on weight. And of course that's a concern for me, because anyone in a wheelchair needs to mobilise to transfer. And the heavier you are, the harder that task becomes. So those were the sorts of things that were of concern to me.
And I think you've also been given some information by the staff as to what your daughter was or wasn't doing.
Yeah. I mean, some of my interaction with the care home was on the phone, and they were telling me that they were concerned about her low mood. They were concerned about the fact that she was opting out of, kind of the activities they were doing in the unit to keep people occupied. She didn't want to get out of her pyjamas sometimes, so she was kind of disengaging from things, which of course is another concern.
Yeah, and you say that staff had also reported concerns to the managers as they felt that she was becoming depressed.
Yes.
Were these indications that you've just given perhaps manifestations of her depression?
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah. What you say is that the care home manager did contact the local care home hub seeking clarification on home visits. Can you just tell us what the local care home hub was?
I don't really know what the care home hub was. I think it was set up by the Health and Social Care Partnership, I think. And I think, because I never got clarity on it, they were kind of like a funnel for information. So if a care home had an issue, they would maybe direct it through there first, and then it would be sent, I think, on to wherever it was supposed to be sent.
And you say that you believed that there was contact with public health, but that nothing changed.
Nothing changed. When the guidance came out, I think, about the garden visits, there was a document that I found, it was entitled Frequently Asked Questions, and in that document it stated that my care homes for people with learning disabilities, when can we start home visits for residents who do this as part of their care programme. Now that obviously applied to my daughter because she would visit my home. It also applied to my daughter because her home is registered as a home for people with learning disabilities and complex needs. So I kind of pounced on that, hoping that that might be a mechanism we could use for her to be able to get out of the home.
This is what you tell us about in paragraph 42 of your statement.
Yes.
And having alighted on that piece of guidance, did that help you?
That piece of guidance? Well, it certainly raised my hopes, but they were very quickly dashed.
But in practical terms, did it help?
They were very quickly dashed because, from my memory, I understand that public health refused the care home manager for visits home at that time.
Now, make reference to a number of items of correspondence that you had with Scottish Care and also with the Minister.
Yes.
And we will be asking you to provide those,
yes.
And we will be looking at those
yes.
In due course. But you say that there was a response, and I assume this is a response from in relation to the letter that you sent to Jean Freeman. And it came from a policy advisor, this is paragraph 45.
Yes.
And what was the response?
Well, they did respond to me, and they told me that obviously there was a report which the government had been looking at, which I think gave them, the result was that if you had a learning disability, you were more prone to becoming seriously ill with COVID. But my daughter doesn't have any other coexisting illnesses. Her illness, if you want to refer to it as an illness, is her mental health and her anxiety. Yeah. And I felt that that was almost like a justification for not progressing things.
And again, with the benefit of hindsight, which is a great thing, is it possible that you could have pushed that matter a little harder and focused on your daughter's individual circumstances?
Well, I'm not convinced that would have really made much difference, because it seemed to me that wherever I turned, the answer was always going to be no.
Yeah. Okay. You then mentioned that your daughter's father's partner died, and I get the impression that this was a person who was also important in your daughter's life.
Well, yes. I mean, my ex-husband had been with his partner for 20 years, yes. So she was well known to my daughter, yeah. Yes.
And this was something that your daughter was obviously upset by.
Yes,
and,
because
her father was able to go in and tell her this, but was unable to offer any comfort to her.
Her father's partner had been ill for about 6 months, but we decided not to tell her about this, because we didn't want to heap more anxiety onto someone who was already struggling to manage their anxiety. And it obviously came as quite a shock to her, because she didn't even know she was ill. But these were decisions we made as a family to try to protect my daughter and not exacerbate her anxiety and distress any further. So yes, when she found out about that, and that was some weeks after she had sadly passed away, those are the circumstances around which she had to find out about that.
And you tell us then about... I'm sorry.
Sorry, it was hard for her dad. You know, it was very unnatural for her father not to be able to console her either. Yes.
Now, we know about inside visits as they progressed, and you tell us about those. Perhaps, if it's of any comfort to you, some of what you say in there are not as bad as some of the other accounts of inside visits that we've heard. You were never supervised.
No, I was not supervised. I mean, the staff knew me. They knew they could trust me. I always followed all the requests that they made of me. So there was never any question of them sitting beside me while I was having visits with my daughter. Absolutely not.
How did your daughter react to these inside visits? How did she react to these inside visits?
Well, again, they were completely unnatural. I mean, you know, to be sat on a chair, not allowed to move around a room, not allowed to go near her, not allowed to cuddle her, not allowed to touch her even. It's a completely unnatural position to find yourself in. And for her, it was difficult for her to appreciate why those things were going on.
Now, in paragraph 48, you mention another member of her family. Please don't name her, but it's your sister. Mm-hmm. We don't need to have her name. Mm-hmm. And you say that she was very close to your daughter, spoke to her every day on the video calls, and she, this is your sister, was sufficiently concerned that she started to express concern about the decline in your daughter's mental health.
She did.
And I think you quote from what your daughter had told your sister, which was that she was, quote, on the floor. And your sister observed that every day your daughter, looked more and more unwell, and had talked to her of giving up. Yeah. Were those thoughts that she had also shared with you?
No, she didn't. She never said those specific things to me. Those were obviously, she maybe didn't want to upset me. I'm not sure, but she she was expressing those to my sister. And in fact, I was speaking to my sister about this the other night, and you know, even discussing this with my sister, she was in tears about this whole situation. She hadn't said that to me, but she said plenty of other things, which I hope we'll go on to.
Yes, well, we'll get to those in a moment, Mrs. Gibson. I think then you go on to make the point that there were, by September 2020, changes for the general public, which obviously didn't apply in your circumstances or those of your daughter.
Yeah. I mean, that's just something I find really difficult to rationalise. I mean, to me, it was out-and-out discrimination that she was unable to enjoy the freedoms that everybody else was, just because she had the misfortune to have to stay in a care home because of her difficulties. That was really tough to accept, and I couldn't really see the logic of that. I couldn't understand it. The care home staff were coming in and out, going home to their families, doing all these things, coming back in, looking after my daughter, and I couldn't understand why she was restricted in that way. I just could not get the logic of that at all.
You make reference, and obviously I think, get the impression, Mrs. Gibson, that you were somebody who was certainly au fait with the various changes in the guidance as it was progressing.
Yes.
And I think we understand why that would be the case. You do say that Scottish Government guidance came out in October 2020, this is paragraph 50 of your statement, outlining that visits could be up to 4 hours with touch. But you ascertained that the chief executive of the local public health area confirmed that he was not in favour of this aspect of the new guidance. What was your reaction to that?
Well, first of all, I was hugely upset and disappointed in that. I couldn't really understand why he was saying that, because he said because there was a high amount of COVID in the community. But the people that were caring for my daughter are living in the community. They were the people that were going in and out. So for me, I couldn't understand why my arrival in the care home would have made such a difference to the level of risk that was being taken at the time. And all my daughter wanted to do was have a hug from her mum.
And you, I suppose, emphasise this point from your perspective in paragraph 52, and again it's a point we've heard from many witnesses, and it is that you would be the last person to put your daughter's health at risk.
Yes, I would be the last person to put any of the other residents that live with my daughter at risk either. So, you know, I was living at home, I live in the country, I was living with my husband, we were obeying all the rules that were going on at the time, and I think I was testing even by that stage. So, there were mitigations in place as well that I just couldn't understand why the decision was being made to not allow me to at least hug my daughter.
Are you aware of, and you may in fact go on to this, but are you aware of where that decision to prevent that contact with your daughter was emanating from?
I believe it was emanating from public health, and I believe it was emanating from the head office of the care home provider.
Okay. And can you explain how you've come to that view?
Because, well, I have a copy of a letter that was sent to the care home managers, and I also have a copy of a letter that was sent to me from the head office of the care home provider.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I think in paragraphs 53 and 54, you talk about the increasing concern that you had about your daughter's mental health at that time. And I think you say in 53 that the deputy care home manager sent a risk assessment to public health outlining the impact
That's
that not
correct.
getting out of the care home to visit you was having on your daughter.
That's correct, yes.
So that care home manager was sufficiently concerned about it to write.
Yes, they were. Everybody was concerned about
And then
about
you
her.
go on to talk about your daughter's social worker, who
Yes.
similarly had concerns.
Yes. So my daughter was very lucky. She had a fantastic social worker who was in touch with my daughter all through the pandemic on video calls, weekly or fortnightly. And so he was seeing, and he was also aware of the impact that this was having. So he also contacted the care home to outline his concerns about that.
And I think just so that we get the context of that, in paragraph 54, you say that what the social worker, I think it is, was confirming was the disruption to your daughter's normal routines were at a critical level.
Yeah. And that was a view shared by all the professionals and family members in attendance at her online MDT review, which is a multidisciplinary team review that we were able to have because obviously everybody was aware that she was struggling with her mental health through this time.
As I take it from paragraph 55, you were not aware of, or you didn't see a reply
No,
to those communications.
no, no.
And could you just read what you say at the second sentence of paragraph 55, beginning it felt?
It felt like the local public health department was taking no notice of the risks to my daughter's mental and physical well-being by ignoring risk assessments and emails and continuing to apply blanket bans to residents. I feel that they showed no regard for my daughter's mental or physical welfare. There was still no progress.
Well, you're now 3 years on from that. Are you still of that same view?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You then talk about the circumstances of Christmas 2020, and I think we can see that the fact that presents had to be sanitized, etc. And I think you say in paragraph 57 that your abiding memory of Christmas that year was your daughter sobbing
Yes.
while she was trying to open her presents.
Yes. That was a particularly distressing moment, I have to say.
Yeah.
And again, I know that this has been raised by other people. At the end, I say it was so distressing to see a carer consoling her when that's my job as
Yes.
her own mother. I just struggled with that.
Yeah. In March 2021, you were permitted to take her out for a walk along a country lane near the home, where, as you say, you were unlikely to meet other people. You say it was extremely undignified for both of you. Again, could you just explain why you say that?
Well, in order to be allowed to do this, I had to be completely covered in PPE. So I had a mask on, I had gloves on, and I had a plastic apron on. So I was walking around outside, fully PPE'd up outside in the fresh air. And I mean, I thought, I'm her mum. I'm not. This is just not appropriate.
Yeah.
I couldn't see that being outside for a walk in the fresh air was a high-risk activity.
Right, problem solved. On you go, Mr. Gale.
Thank you, my lord. Mrs. Gibson, we were talking about the contact with the Care Inspectorate.
Yes.
And the support they gave you.
Yes.
And subsequent to that, as I understand it, there was confirmation that your daughter could have visits to the dentist and the hairdresser, that they could proceed.
Yes. I mean, I had been struggling with the question of getting my daughter out of her care home for many, many months. You know, this was April 2021, and I still hadn't managed to get her out. And I know that other people were getting out of their care homes. So it was just a complete anathema to me about why I was having all this difficulty. So I decided, I mean, at that point, you know, you wonder where you're going to turn next. So I turned to the Care Inspectorate, and I have to say that they were a huge support to me. One of the inspectors there, I think her responsibility was in connection with people with learning disabilities. So, you know, she was very, very constructive. And we set up meetings with the care home manager to find out about how we were going to present the risk assessments in a way that would allow my daughter to get out of the care home. Now, the other point I want to make about this is that when other people were getting out of the care home, no one else was having to produce these risk assessments. I seemed to be the only one out of my care home, my core group, that was having to go through all these hoops simply to get my daughter out to get her hair cut.
Are you able to hazard a guess as to why that was the case?
No. I think again, all of these barriers were coming from the head office of the care home provider, quite honestly. I think that's where the main, and then public health also were taking their time about signing these risk assessments off. Nobody seemed to have any sense of urgency at that time, which was really difficult for me to swallow, as you know, it was over a year since my daughter had been unable to leave her care home.
You say in paragraph 64 that you understand that the Care Inspectorate got in touch with the care provider based in England.
Yes, that's correct.
Can I just ask, was there any difficulty so far as understanding the extent and nature of the guidance being issued by the Scottish Government when one was dealing with a care home provider based in England as opposed to one based in Scotland, to your knowledge?
Well, yes, because what was happening was the company head office was in England, and they were applying English guidance to Scottish guidance, you know, as opposed to Scottish guidance, and this was a huge problem, not just for myself but for other people whose relatives were in care homes where the head office is based in England. And from the correspondence that I have, I'm able to deduce that was one of the real problems for me, was this barrier. And the other point I'd like to make is that, you know, they were aware at the head office of the circumstances around my daughter. They were aware of the difficulties that she was experiencing, and nobody seemed to want to find any kind of creative approach to try to lessen the problems for her, in my view. You know, everybody spent their time telling us what we couldn't do, but nobody seemed to want to, you know, flip the record and look at how we could make things happen for people. I mean, I think there were probably many opportunities missed there for my daughter to be able to have got out of the care home. But nobody seemed to want to take responsibility for it. Nobody seemed to want to make the decision. Everything seemed to get passed around like a parcel, quite frankly.
Well, the parcel eventually was passed around sufficiently, I suppose, to allow your daughter to go to the dentist and to the hairdresser.
Yes.
That did
that's
progress.
something she should have been able to do the previous summer, I mean, if they weren't, I kept pointing out, if these venues weren't safe for us, then they weren't safe, you know, for my daughter, they weren't safe for us, because, you know, people were asked to follow the guidance, whatever the business was, they were asked to follow the guidance and provide mitigations for the spread of COVID. So because all of those things were happening, I just couldn't understand why it was more of a risk for my daughter to get her hair cut than it was for me. And can I also say that having her hair cut really became problematic for her. She has long hair, and I used to watch her on the video calls struggling to put her hair up, and that would be another thing that would be distressing for her. It was also another way of taking away her independence, because she was able to put her hair up herself. And it might seem a small thing to people, but it's not a small thing to somebody, you know, who's struggling to do that and can't understand why they're being put in that position.
She was eventually allowed to visit your home in, I think, May, taking it backwards, in May 2021.
Yes.
But this again was subject to an agreement that you had to have in relation to the circumstances.
Yes.
Can you just tell us about that, please?
Well, sorry, where am I? I'm kind of losing my place here.
I'm sorry, my fault. You're at paragraph 67.
Okay, yeah. So from my memory, the agreement was that she was not allowed to come into my home, but could be in the garden. And I recall it started to rain, and my husband, me and her twin sister had to stand inside the entrance to my house, and my daughter had to be placed on the doorstep with an umbrella over her. I did this as I was just so relieved to have got her home at last and didn't want to break the trust with the care home manager. When I look back at this, I can't believe I agreed to it.
And as you say in paragraph 68, your daughter didn't see any other members of her family in person, except for her father, I think, on this incident you refer to.
Yes, that's right.
Since until June, 19th of June 2021.
And her twin sister had a baby, and she didn't see the child until she saw him on the 19th of June.
Lord, that's an hour. I wonder if we might. We don't have another witness this morning, so there isn't the usual time pressure. So, and there are a few things that I would like to still go through with Mrs. Gibson. So perhaps we could take a break.
Yep. 15 minutes be enough?
That would be fine, my Lord. Yes, thank you.
Good. We'll come back by 11:15. Right. There we go. Thank you. When you're ready, Mr. Gill.
Good, my lord. Mrs. Gibson, we got to the section in your statement, paragraph 69, where you set out the impacts on your daughter. And some of this, obviously, you've prefaced in what you've said already, so forgive me if I don't go through all of it. But you use, again, some of the phrases that we've heard in paragraph 61. Apparently, you say that your daughter felt her home now felt more like a prison.
Yeah, she referred to feeling like a prisoner very often, yep. And we'll come on to that. I know that you'll hear that for her words.
And you refer to her low mood.
Yes.
Her being depressed, which we've touched on already. Perhaps in 71 is perhaps a significant or perhaps detailed point. She had no access to speech and language therapy. Was that something that she required and had been having?
Yes, my daughter has a speech and language therapist that she saw regularly before COVID. She would see her online, and she still sees her now, but she goes obviously out to meet her now. And she was going to music therapy because that was something that people felt was it was a safe space for her to be able to express the things that were upsetting her at the time. But those things were all done on Zoom, and of course that's not the same at all. She couldn't bang her piano or bang her tambourine or shout, or she wasn't able to express herself in the way that she could. I mean, all of these services were stopped for people. But I got, when I got the final report from her music therapist, he did refer to the fact that it wasn't the best way for her to interact with him.
And did your daughter express that to you, that she found that frustrating?
She expressed that in one of her recordings.
Right, we'll come to that.
I'm not sure if if I included that particular recording in the words, but
well, you can tell us about it if it's not there. You also say her independence and freedom of choice was completely taken away from her.
Yes, it was. She wasn't free to leave her home. She wasn't free to choose what she did with her day. She was beholden to a set of rules that were being applied across the board, forgetting that at the end of these rules was actually a person, and a person who was struggling.
Again, something perhaps you haven't mentioned directly, paragraph 73, she was struggling to sleep at night.
She was, and in point of fact, when I was going through all my emails that I have a folder of, one of them to the care inspector was referred to the fact that she hadn't slept for 8 nights. And she was becoming more and more anxious. And she was also becoming more and more dependent on sleeping medication, which was a real concern to me, because obviously you can become reliant on those things. It used to be as prescribed if she required it for any reason, but she was asking for it every single night. And that was a huge problem for me, that she was on this additional medication that she didn't need to be on before in that way.
Perhaps we can combine paragraphs 74 and 75. Essentially, what, as I understand you're saying, is that she struggled with the changes in the world.
Oh, she did. She found that. I mean, when she got locked down, she'd probably been out the day before, and life was normal. And then when she came out, everything had changed. Even, every single thing had changed. Even the fact that her mum taking her out in the car, when I finally got her out, I had to wear a mask. all of these kinds of small changes were quite problematic for her.
And the other point in 75, which is the one we touched on earlier, that she doesn't talk about her future.
No, it's a conversation that's just disappeared.
I
feel it was a lost opportunity. You know, there was an opportunity to develop that for her, but it's a complete lost opportunity now.
Right.
The traction.
Do you feel there is any possibility of that returning?
I mean, it may do. It took a long time for her to even get to that point where she would even mention something like that, because she had come from a service that had let her down badly before, and you know, she used to talk about that and not want to go back there. But she did. She'd been working really hard, and so had all the staff and all the professional people involved with my daughter, working really hard to get her to a point where she was able to express more her feelings and what she wanted to do. And so I feel what happened there was, if there was to be an opportunity for that, and of course there was no guarantee of that because life can change every day with my daughter, but I do feel it was a missed opportunity because the traction on that discussion just disappeared.
Now, we've heralded this before. Your daughter has recorded some of her thoughts, which you've taken down, and you've set down for us. And these date from the 4th of September, so just a few months into the pandemic, right through to the 18th of January 2022. And given that this is an opportunity for your daughter to set out her thoughts to the inquiry, I wonder if you would read them out for us, please.
Sure. So these are my daughter's words. They would be recorded at various times. It might have been when she was on a call with me on her iPad. It might have been when I was sitting with her. So they've been recorded at all different times. So I'll not read out the dates, I think. I'll just go through the words if that's all right.
Yes.
I'm not all right because I feel like I'm stuck in here and I would like to get my freedom back. I would like to go out again and be back to normal because I feel like I'm stuck in here. This is shocking because I can't do what I used to do, like go out with you and my auntie. This is a piece of nonsense because it's making me sick, anxious. I really want a life, like not staying in here all the time, and it's not giving me a life staying in the house all the time. I feel like it's setting me back. It's affecting me in a big bad way. It's keeping me back. I feel like this problem is never going to end. And then my daughter, excuse me, was aware that with my connection with Care Home Relatives Scotland, that I was attending meetings in the government. And in point of fact, she did attend a couple of meetings with the government officials. So this was the first message that she sent to the government. I feel like I'm down on my knees and it's destroying my life, and it feels like I'm getting nowhere. And it's making me feel unwell, and I'm fed up because I feel stuck and it's getting too much now. It feels like I'm getting nowhere by asking my mum questions, and my mum can't give me the answers I want to hear because my mum has got no answers to give me. And then her second message to the government. It feels like I'm a prisoner and not able to do things like go out shopping with my mum, and I'm not able to get home, and I would like it back to normal, and I feel stuck in here, and it's hard to keep it together, and I'm not able to get cuddles from my family. I feel like I've lost my family. I would like to do something about it. I would like to tell somebody how I'm feeling, somebody in the government. I feel angry and fed up. And then this last recording was one she'd been able to get out, and then we got COVID in the home. Why should I stay at home if I've not got COVID? It's not doing my health any good, and it's making me feel low. Why can't I have a test every day to let me out the same as staff? It feels that if someone else has got COVID, it's stopping me from doing the things I want to do. When COVID is here, I can't see people who help me, and it feels like I'm locked up again. It feels like I'm back to square one again. It feels like I'm a prisoner again, and I don't think that's fair on me. What's the point of me speaking up if no one is listening to me?
Now, I think you know that Lord Brailsford and I will be seeing
Yes.
and meeting your daughter next week.
Yes.
So we can obtain information directly from her, but thank you very much for recording those and providing us with them. Can I just ask you about one of those observations she makes? It's in the immediately above February 2021. It's from the 16th of January 2021, and she says, "It feels like I'm getting nowhere by asking my mum questions, and my mum can't give me the answers I want to hear because my mum has got no answers to give me." How did that make you feel?
Well, it was really hard because I was working in the background all the time, doing everything I possibly could think of to try to get results for my daughter, and it made me feel sad because she obviously didn't understand that. She didn't understand what I was doing, even though I would tell her that I was meeting with the government. So it was very difficult to hear that. You know, at that stage. I mean, when was that? Sorry, when was that?
I think that was January.
Yeah.
2021.
I'd been fighting this issue since I first wrote to the head of Scottish Care and Jean Freeman in the beginning of August. So, yeah, it was pretty devastating to feel that she felt that. But obviously it was hard to try to explain to her what was going on and I had to be careful what I said because, you know, certain things could trigger anxiety for her. So, and also she would pick up, because of the way she understands things, she might pick up something incorrectly, and then that would, of itself, become a trigger for anxiety.
Yeah. I think we can read the remaining comments you have about visits in paragraphs 77 to 80. I don't think it's necessary to go through that. Much of it is, and it's not a criticism, Mrs. Gibson, a lot of it is repetition of what you've said and what others have said. You make the point in paragraph 83 is that she hated seeing people wearing masks. That would not only be you, but other members of those caring for her, presumably.
She never saw a member of staff without a mask on for 2 years. And, you know, for people like my daughter and some of the other residents that were living with her, facial expression and communication are very, very important aspects of their support. And so that was something, in my view, that was quite, I mean, I understood they needed to wear them, but I feel that people needed to understand there was also another problem with people wearing masks for someone like my daughter or some of the other residents in her unit.
You tell us about evidence at paragraphs 86 through to 91. And can I just say to you, Mrs. Gibson, that the inquiry team will be contacting you through your solicitors to obtain material from you. So, and we're very grateful to you for preserving that and making that available to us. You also tell us about your connection with PAMIS and also with Care Home Relative Scotland. I think it's perhaps interesting to note in paragraph 94 that you came across other mothers who were in similar situations.
Yes.
This is through PAMIS.
It was, yes. I call them the PAMIS mums. Yes. I was introduced to PAMIS because I originally contacted Scottish Care when I was struggling to know where to go to get help, and they referred me to the Scottish Council for People with Learning Disabilities, and they then referred me to PAMIS. And that was where I really discovered the kind of communal feeling that our adult children were invisible to the government. I mean, every mum that I knew through there was feeling exactly the same thing. We were all trying at that time to be seen as, you know, part of the care team. That was the clarion call that was going out there.
And that led you to Zoom meetings with politicians,
Yes.
which was cross-party
Yes.
engagement, and it also led you to being interviewed by the media.
That's right.
Is that a comfortable experience?
Not at all. No, no, I hated it, but I felt I had to, at that stage, we were all so desperate to try to see movement on this that, you know, I did get involved in it, but it was not a comfortable experience for me at all.
We go on to your involvement with Care Home Relatives Scotland, and I think in particular you talk about the engagement with Jean Freeman to ask, this is paragraph 101, whether you could join in on their online meetings.
Yes.
And you say that you've been fully involved as a core member of the group since then, attending many meetings with this Scottish Government policy advisors and ministers.
Yes. That's
Is that something you've continued up to now?
Yes, we're still involved in meetings, yes.
And is a lot of what you're concentrating on now your campaign for Anne's Law?
Absolutely. Yes, that is, I don't think that we will stop our campaigning until we have Anne's Law enshrined into law.
And I think to pay tribute, I think obviously you would want to pay tribute to PAMIS, but also to pay tribute to the core group of Care Home Relatives Scotland, who you say have been a great support to you.
Yes, yes. I, to be quite honest, until I met PAMIS and met the mums, I was struggling myself with how to cope and manage with the situation. Mm-hmm. So, yes, those connections have been invaluable to me and have allowed me to, you know, to cope with everything that was going on. Yeah.
Yeah. You then go on to deal with some other issues with the pandemic, and perhaps this is something we've already touched on, but in paragraph 104, you say midway down that paragraph, however, I feel the care home provider, whose head office was in England, was just not prepared to change things for my daughter, despite being informed on the many occasions about the impact the restrictions were having on her.
Yes.
Were you ever given an explanation through the care home or indeed through anyone else as to why those changes could not be accommodated for your daughter?
No. Not at all. I got no feedback at all. You see, obviously, when I was dealing with the care home manager, I wasn't then party to any further discussions that were going on with anyone else. But because nothing was changing, I mean, they knew about it. They knew about my daughter. They knew about how upset and distressed she was. And I just feel that there should have been opportunity to work out how to make things easier for her, but they weren't.
Paragraph 106, you acknowledge, I think, and again we're hearing this, that managers were inundated with guidance from government, public health and providers coming at them from all angles. And you say, I felt that often providers' guidance took precedence.
Yes.
Ian, can you explain that a little bit? How did you come to that view?
I come to the conclusion because all of the evidence I've got would point to that it didn't seem to matter what got presented, nothing changed, and I know that the manager was trying their very best to make things change for my daughter. So they just didn't.
Go to paragraph 107. You refer to the 14 months
Yes.
that you were denied permission to have your daughter leave the care home. And you make the point about the differing guidance in Scotland and England, and the provision and providers applying English guidance in care homes in Scotland. Did you, and we will come in due course in this inquiry to look in detail at the guidance and to compare how it may fall with the guidance that was applicable in England. But did you come across any particular examples where it was apparent to you that what was applicable in Scotland was not being applied because there was a view that the English guidance in some way took precedence?
Well, one of the examples for that would probably be about when Open with Care came out and getting my daughter out, that I was struggling to get her out. I know that people would always have to refer to their head office all the time. They had to refer everything to the head office. So that would be an example. Other people were getting their relative out in a car, and I was still struggling to get permission for that. And despite the care home manager obviously doing her best to get permission for me to do that, that permission had to come from the head office.
You also make reference in 107 to the inconsistent application leading to what you say was a postcode lottery.
Yes.
Can you give an example of that, or are you aware of situations where that might have been apparent?
Well, I suppose, again, when I was trying to get my daughter out, I knew that other people had been able to get their relative out of care home, and I still was struggling to do that. So why was that? Why would that have been the case? Mm-hmm. I don't understand that.
And I think, again, you make a point in 108, which is a point we've heard before, that the government was able to enforce guidance in relation to other types of businesses and institutions, but couldn't enforce it when it came to care homes.
That's right. I mean, the problem with the guidance was the guidance would come out, and then, it could be down to public health or a health and social care partnership or a care home manager or a care home provider as to what they chose to implement and when. And that led to, I think, quite a lot of chaos and confusion around guidance.
Very important question whether, if it was only guidance, they were, as a matter of law, entitled to enforce it. And they might have been open to challenge, but for reasons that I have expressed views on in a court, far less here, that doesn't seem to have happened. Well, perhaps we'll look at that, Mr. Gill.
We will, my lord, yes. You make a number of references to your daughter's human rights were thrown completely under a bus. We understand that from what you've said, and you put it in trenchant terms there. Just a few more points. You pose in paragraph 112 a serious question, and that is, what was the plan if there had been no vaccinations?
Yes.
And you say, would residents have been confined forever? Is that,
yes. I mean, yeah. I mean, what was what if we hadn't got vaccination? What was to have happened? Who was coming up with the plan to make life better for people in care homes? I just couldn't understand why there was no other plan that I could see at the time.
Could I go to the other end of that spectrum, if I may, Mrs. Gibson, and take you back perhaps to the beginning of the pandemic? Were you concerned that there was there may have been insufficient planning for the specific circumstances of your daughter's situation in a care home?
Well, I think one of my colleagues has made the point that there was no one person in government who seemed to have overall responsibility for care homes. I think that there was a lack of understanding of how care homes operated, that they're not clinical settings, they are people's homes. I'm not sure what amount of work would have gone into identifying what would have happened to different vulnerable groups in line with all of the restrictions that were being put in at the time. So when I got involved with Care Home Relative Scotland, what I was trying to do was alert the government to the fact that, you know, it's not just elderly people that are living in care homes, even though I understand the majority of people are. And I think the average length of stay in a care home is probably around 2 years. But, you know, for someone like my daughter, who'd been living in her home for 11 years and was a younger person and was, I understood, less at risk of becoming seriously ill with COVID because she was a younger person, I'm not sure, and had all those vulnerabilities, I'm not sure what work had gone into thinking through the impacts on people. Because what happened was, guidance came out, there were rules, there were a one-size-fits-all set of rules, and I think what people forgot was that at the end of these rules was a person. And every person was suffering in a completely different way.
You make also the point that you say that certain organisations that you name who were there or should have been there to protect vulnerable groups were conspicuous by their absence.
Yes, I mean, I think as a group we felt that, you know, why was it down to 5/6 women to be kind of pushing on all of these issues? I mean, if they were, I wasn't aware of it. I'm not aware of how visible these organisations were. And in point of fact, I seem to recall that we had a meeting with the Human Rights Commission at one point, and all they wanted to talk about was things going on in the future. And I remember saying to them, but we're dealing with the present. We need to sort out the present now, not the future. The future's for another day. I can't remember when that meeting was, but some of us from our organisation were in that meeting. Yeah, I don't feel that these organisations were visible enough and were pushing enough on the you know, on the harms that were affecting people. To me, there was no balance. There wasn't a great balance of harms. Everything was seen through the prism of COVID. And nobody else seemed to really focus on what the harms were, even though I remember when I got a reply from the head of Scottish Care in August 2020, he said in that reply that the Health Secretary and the Clinical Professional Advisory Group were aware of adults like my daughter, and that obviously that was something that would need to be looked into, and consistent guidance would have to be produced around how to manage those situations. And I think in that email as well, from memory, he also spoke about the balance of harm.
And balancing of restrictions is something you mentioned in 114, and I think we understand where you're coming from on that point. You do also say that your role as her mother and POA was compromised.
Yes. Well,
explain that, please.
Well, I have power of attorney, as you know, for my daughter. Part of my responsibilities under the power of attorney is responsibility for her care and responsibility for things like, you know, her socialisation. Now, those responsibilities, I believe, were taken away from me because my daughter then was subjected to the rules that were coming from everyone else. So, you know, the rules were coming from the government, I wasn't free to alter those rules in any way. So therefore, that's why I believed that my POA was compromised. No. I wasn't able to take her to the you know, all of these things that we do as power of attorney, you know, go in the room, check everything's okay, you know, check her toothbrush doesn't need a new head, check her hair's okay, check her what clothes does she need, all of these things. For the beginning were compromised. And even when I got in, I wasn't allowed to walk around her room, so I couldn't have checked anything.
The last sentence of paragraph 114 is probably, in a way, sums up an awful lot that you've said, and perhaps you would just read it, please.
Her life pre-COVID was completely dismantled. I mean, all of the things that had gone into, you know, helping my daughter, supporting my daughter, I felt that a lot of those things were just taken away from her, and all of the work that had gone in, I mean, there were very real risks for her that things would have got really very, very bad.
Yeah.
I don't, to be quite honest with you, Mr. Gale, I don't know how my daughter survived and got through that, but she did, and I'm grateful for that.
Indeed. Now, Mrs. Gibson, again, there's a certain element of summary in what you say, but I'd be grateful if you'd read 119, paragraph 119, to the end of 124, please.
Throughout this entire experience, I have felt anger, exhaustion, frustrated, but mostly powerlessness. Even though I was involved as a core member of CHRS, I never gave up on trying to be a voice for my daughter. It seems to me that my daughter got lost in the minefield of guidance and the freedom that various agencies had to interpret and implement guidance in the way that they saw fit. Scottish Government did not write their guidance on the back of a cigarette packet. It was informed by scientific and medical experts, so it was hard to accept that others felt they knew better. I felt as if there were always barriers in place preventing my daughter getting out of the care home or to get essential visits despite all my effort. The authorities, which included the Scottish Government, Public Health and the care provider, were all aware of the impact the continued imprisonment was having on my daughter's mental and physical health. Tests and vaccines did not seem to be making much difference in respect of her getting out of the care home. I would like to know why people who knew how the restrictions were affecting her thought it was okay to lock my daughter up for 14 months. The COVID pandemic took a huge toll on everyone. I never expected to be involved in campaigning, and it has had a significant effect on me personally. Being in the public eye has never been comfortable for me. It has been the most challenging, exhausting experience of my life. I truly believe it should never have been this hard.
Thank you. You look to thoughts for the inquiry, and I think these are thoughts that we've heard from your colleagues in the core group, and they centre around the necessity for Anne's Law as a matter of urgency.
Yes, absolutely.
The situation and recognition that what happened to those in care homes must never be allowed to happen again. And also the respect that should be accorded to individuals rather than, I'm paraphrasing, well, I'm not paraphrasing, as you mentioned blanket bans further in that paragraph.
Yes.
So it's a concentration on the individual.
Yes. Person-centred care was missing,
yes,
in my view.
Yes. And you mentioned imprisonment in a care home, which is an expression, obviously, we've come across many times, and we've now heard it from your daughter.
Yes.
And you also say that you believe that all residents should always have access to a relative or friend, no matter what the circumstances.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that probably takes us back to the essential visitor that you referred to earlier in your evidence. Mrs. Gibson, is there anything that you would like to say further to what you've already said and what is contained in your statement so that we have it for the record and for the inquiry to consider.
For me, the important thing in all of this is that my daughter's voice is heard, and what happened to her is recognised by the inquiry.
Well, as I said, Lord Brailsford and I will have the pleasure of meeting your daughter next week, and hopefully, through what you've said, our voice has been heard. So we're very grateful to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Gibson.
2 o'clock.
Can we make it 2:45?
We can make it, I'm sure we can, yes.
Yeah, let's try and do that.
Yep.
Thank you.